Welcome to today's class. So till previous class, we touched upon two stages of compilation, namely lexical analysis and syntax analysis. Hope you got a fair idea how lexical analysis and syntax analysis are carried out through various methods. And today we shall discuss about the last stage of the compilation, which is the code generation. The final outcome of a compiler is generation of a object code. Whatever the lexical analysis, syntax analysis will just confirm that the written program complies the language constructs or the syntax semantics of a given programming language. But that is not the end of a compilation. So compiler should generate enable and efficient code which is in object form so that the program can be executed as and when required. If that is the case, code generation again is equally more complicated and more important rather in the stage of a compilation process. But here what we touch upon here is whatever the data we have in terms of syntax analysis entries will be only used to generate various subroutines or routines such that we can go ahead with the code generation depending upon the mission with which we are working. Hope the screen is visible now.
Yes.
So code generation is a very important and a crucial and critical task as part of the compilation process, and the code generated need to be more efficient also, because as we know the code generated might also contain some of the redundant values or some values which are not used as part of the programming. If that is the case, such values should not be considered in the code, otherwise they will be eating up memory and time of the system. So optimization of the code is also a very important topic which we'll discuss as we go. But at this point of time, how code generation is done, what is the way behind code generation process, and how and which type of routines we need to have for the code generation is what we discuss in general. We don't have much details about the code generation here because code generation is more specific into the language we are using and the underlying architecture with which we are working. Since we are talking about SIC and SIC-XE, more so our code generation we can discuss in lines of SIC and SIC-XE so that you will get an idea of what is code generation. Okay, so now the code generation is a concept where we have a entire programming language program getting translated into the actual outcome of required out of the compiler, that is the object program. The minute we talk about object program, architecture will come in front of us, and the underlying architecture, whatever it is, SIC, SIC-XE, Pentium, whatever the architecture we have, Intel architecture, all those will be kept in place, and accordingly we will be generating the object code. It is pretty same as the process what you have seen in the case of an assembler, where we have so much of internal dependency on the architecture. Unless we have those details, we will not be able to generate the code. Since we have already seen them in the assembler, our requirement here is not to go in detail again, but to just understand the stage of the compilation which involves the code generation here. So first thing what we have to understand here is every construct that we have seen. Probably if you remember, for Pascal we have taken some 13-14 statements which are a grammar statement like assign, read, factor, exp. If you take, they are the constructs what you have in any programming language. For each of those constructs, that is which is a non-terminal symbol, there we have a specific and unique routine which is a program, which is a procedure. In the previous class, if you remember, in the recursive descent parsing, we have told that for every non-terminal symbol there is a procedure associated such that the parsing will be taken place. That procedure is different because that procedure was meant to whether whatever the input I have will culminate at the end of the day either in a terminal symbol or a non-terminal symbol. If it is a non-terminal symbol, can I go to next level? So that is a concept what you have seen in the case of a parsing. But what is the connection with respect to code generation here is the procedure, meaning that every non-terminal symbol what we have or every terminal symbol what we have in the syntax or maybe in the grammar will have a separate procedure with respect to the code generation. So every grammar rule or every construct in the programming will have two procedures if you are involving recursive descent parsing. If recursive descent parsing is not there, at least one procedure need to be associated for the purpose of code generation. Nevertheless, for every construct we have in the programming language, we need to have a procedure associated with it such that once lexical analysis, syntax analysis is successful, code generation will take place. So that's what we have to understand. The first point is code generation is going to involve routines or procedures for each of the construct that we have as part of the grammar or the programming language. Second, and these routines are called as a semantic routines or code generating routines because they involve more with the actual program rather than anything else. So they're associated more with the meaning of the program rather than anything else. That is the reason why they're called either as a semantic routines or a code generating routines in general. So that is the idea behind the code generation. Second, these semantic routines are, as we know, are there for each and every construct, and they generate the object code for each of them directly because there is no link here. Each one is independent. We have seen in the grammar, each one is a unambiguous. Underline the word unambiguous. There should not be any ambiguity. They're very clear, and each of those constructs will have their own routines, and thereby the routines will generate the independent object code directly on their own through these code generation routines or a semantic routines. That is a basic idea behind the code generation. But if we talk about today, as we speak, our compilers are more complex in nature. If you compare to basic language or Pascal language, today Python or maybe Java or C#, they might be obviously a more complicated or complex compilers compared to the old languages, simply because we have added so many features. Otherwise, nobody would have looked at these new age languages of higher level programming because they have added themselves with a more complicated concepts internally. Maybe we have moved from procedure oriented to object oriented. That itself is a paradigm shift. Obviously, that requires a lot of complexity being built in, and pointers of course require more complex routines to be written. Like that, whenever a new language is brought into the system, those languages might involve complex requirements to be taken care, or doing more work from their end and making the user or the programmer more comfortable with less work. If that is the case, more complications are there at the compiler end or maybe the programming language end. So in order to build those type of complexity within the compilers, you may have to go for a very sophisticated, or rather very what you call more in robust type of routines for this type of semantic routines or as code generation routines. To facilitate that, direct conversion or direct translation from a given language program into a machine code might be a challenge. So some compilers which are of current nature, of a complex nature, might also generate a intermediate form, simply because intermediate form will enable, like we have a bytecode in our Java compiler. It will not directly generate a object code, but it will create an intermediate form in the form of a bytecode. The similar fashion, the current age compilers might expect or might require an intermediate form of the object code to be written, but that is not an object code. Keep you in mind, the whatever the intermediate form is not going to be an object code, but it is going to facilitate the compiler to generate a more optimized program later. So we'll see how intermediate form is going to help us. But what you have to understand here is there are two methods what we can observe here. If a compiler is very simple, it is possible or it may be wise to have a direct code generation from a given programming language to its object code. However, when the program is complex or when compilers are expected to work on a very complex type of programs or data, then it may not be possible or it may not be feasible rather to directly convert or translate a given high-level programming language into its object code. So what might be required? An intermediate form might be required, so that intermediate form might enable or will enable everything that is going to come as the next as an object program. But mind you, intermediate form is not a object program. It is only a facilitator. It's just a facility just coming in between and helping the final object program to be more optimal in nature. So why this intermediate form is required? To make the final object code more optimal, because there's some intermediate party or some intermediate verification we can imagine in a general line, which is going to help to have a better object program at the end, maybe an efficient program or maybe in a more optimized program. But intermediate form is also possible, is what we have to observe. But intermediate form is not an object program. It is just a one representation of the source program. We can say a revised source program, which is compatible for the object program generation. Since every programming language which is in a high level form need to be converted into its machine language, and that machine language might be in terms of assembly language or maybe whatever the programming language we have at that level, that need to be considered. So every subroutine or every routine which is semantic nature here in the translation of a code into object code might involve these, because they are all architecture dependent, like what we have seen in our assemblers, and they need to be more proficient. That means the designer of a compiler should be more proficient in the internal structure or organization of the architecture that is under consideration. To understand, for more brevity here, let us consider the SIC or SIC-XC, which we have been able to use for all these days, or rather we are comfortable in utilizing or understanding what SIC or SIC-XC. But in reality, every line of the program that we generate, which is in line with the grammar, need to be converted comfortably or suitably into its machine language using one of these languages, maybe assembly language or maybe internal representation, whatever. But at the end, it is ultimately zeros and ones that is required for the system to execute the program. But we need to convert. So finally, our outcome, the code generated, should be in terms of this, maybe an object program, in terms of an assembly language program or some other compatible program, but definitely not in the high level language program. So that's what we need to keep in mind. Since we are comfortable with this SIC-XC, let us visualize every code that we have, maybe in Pascal, in terms of our SIC-XC, so that we will understand what is the concept of a code generation. Is that clear now? So code generation is a process which involves more rigorous routines internally, so that every language construct we have used in this programming or program rather will be converted suitably into their equivalent internal representation, say object code. So that is the idea behind this. So depending upon what type of architecture we have, depending upon what type of underlying programming language we have, accordingly those languages will be used as a mechanism or media, so that we will convert them into those codes. Okay. Once that is done, obviously assembler will come into picture. If it is assembler programming, then it will be converting finally into object code. But this is how the system works for the compilation. But whatever it is very important and critical or crucial stage of compilation, because entire outcome of compilation resides here. Checking on previous two stages is fine, that is only checking end, but conversion, this is actual outcome. So obviously the stage of compilation involving code generation is more important, okay, from that perspective or that point of view. Okay, with this, let us see how we can consider or how code generation rather in general is accomplished. For any system software that we have seen so far, we touched upon the data structures that are required, and more so we have also seen the pseudocode and algorithm. But here, since as we know, we are not going to generate compiler for any specific higher level programming language here, but we are understanding on the other side of it, that means how this is accomplished. So probably we'll touch upon the general data structures that are used in the code generation process. So in general, we'll be using a stack and a queue. So these are the two basic data structures which are used in a code generation. This is just a basic. There might be other data structures depending upon the type of programming language we have, the type of complexity it involves. But minimum stack and queue or stack and list are required. And we know stack is a very special kind of a data structure where we have used even recently also, which enables the recursion to be more efficiently carried out. Whereas your queue, which is going to be very straightforward, as the name says queue, it is going to be whichever enters into the system, that is the first in, will be leaving in the first. So that is the concept, and both are complement each other. One is a first in, first out. other one is a last in first out, and you know better how this stack and queue are going to be used. And these are the two data structures what we'll be using, like what we have used symbol table, op table in the assemblers. In addition to that, like location counter, we also require a particular variable here, which is in terms of a list count. So this list count is used to keep track how many number of items are there in the list, or how many number of items are there in the stack pointers and things like that. This is just a variable. And like we have an LOC CTR, which is there in the assembler as a location counter, this value will be kept on updated as and when the number of items are added into the list or removed. Similarly, we know that whatever the lexical analysis, syntax analysis, the data will be reused in the code generation, because that will not go waste. Why? In the case of lexical analysis, each token that we have generated will be converted into its associated number. For example, I have used printf 10 times. It is just one printf. I might have used 100 times, but printf will have its own unique number, maybe say some 20. So whenever we see printf, it will be reflecting by returning 20 always. So when I see some 20, when I compare that with my internal structure, I can make sure that 20 is already valid, and as such 20 is the value what I have received, and I can say printf is a valid token. That is the reason why we have a token numbers. So internally, each of the token is provided with a number, and that number is what we'll be using in the code generation, because we cannot use printf always. So we'll be representing that as its own token number, and for everything that we have generated as a tokens, maybe our identifiers or maybe our data structures or data types, all those will be having a token numbers, and those tokens will be used in the data structure. For that, we'll have this list will be used to represent them as well. So list and stacks are basically used maybe extensively in the case of a code generation for various purposes, maybe to return the tokens, or maybe to take the input values one after the other, or maybe to represent all those, so what is called recursion, or maybe nesting, all those, because today's programming languages are very, very complex. They involve every concept of a programming. If that is the case, we need to provide all those facilities to manipulate them, or maybe to engage with them. So that is how we have these two minimum, but there might be many more other data structures which are part of our code generation process. But to understand at the basic level, let us understand stack and list or queue are going to be part of the data structures in general or in basic. So with this idea of what is a code generation, what are the various procedures, let us look at a regular example what we have been talking about, that is read as well as our assignment statement, how these things are going to be. If you look at the first part, the diagram we have been talking about. And second part, if you see, if you observe here, we have written some code here. This is the code what we're talking about internally. So this is the code available for every routine, for every non-terminal symbol what we have. So this is the code. This part of this is just given for our understanding, but internally it will be reflecting the actual underlying architecture of the programming language what we have. And this is how the routines are written. So you as a compiler designer, we need to make sure that these routines are written internally. Once that is done, for every, this is general routine. What we are seeing in the marked area is general routine. It doesn't matter what value you are giving as input, but they exist as a part of the design of a compiler. Suppose if I give input, say read 20 or read ABC, then that read ABC will be customized using this, and final code will be like this. So final code generated for any or every read statement might look like this. So this you can imagine, this is a part of our actual SIC, XC plus JSub, Word, stuff like that. So this is what we are visualizing, but internally the routines will be written like this. So these routines are general in nature, depending upon what input value we are providing, because if I write 10 printf statements, each printf will be different. But how many routines are available for printf? Only one routine. That one routine will, like a polymorphism, will take each of this printf and analyze, and finally comes with a code of this category. That is idea what we have to see, and you just observe how things are happening. You need not be by hearting anything here, or you need not be doing anything extra, but observe that yes, for every non-terminal symbol we have, or every language construct in general, we have an associated routine or a semantic routine or a code generating routine like this, and they in turn will generate the final object code, final programming code like this, and they will be finally converted back to its mission dependent or mission equivalent codes. That is how we have to see. Similarly, if you observe, take our assignment. Yesterday we were talking about one of the question paper problem where assignment statement was given. This is what we have seen. So this is just an example, not exact mapping of what question I have taken yesterday. That means assignment statement has been customized here. Take this as one of the example. So how the code looks like. So probably like this. Just our imagination. So see, we are not developing any code here, but how it looks, that's how we need to understand. So assign statement, there is another routine called assign, like read what you have seen in the previous program, and we need to get the expression and we need to get the ID, because these are the two things what are not in our control, because as and when input is given, those data has to be taken. So we need to get the expression. Why it is get expression? If you remember, expression involves a lot of characters, plus minus operators and 1 2 3 numbers. So expression involves so many characters. Getting a character requires or get C and stuff like that, what you have seen in the SICXC bootstrap loader. The same case, we have just written a get. So this is another subroutine which involves in getting the string like this. And STA means it is just accumulator, where ID means some numbers what we are getting here. So like that, depending upon what, just a visual, nothing to worry about here, but this is what you need to understand and visualize. Yes, from these type of statements which are part of our maybe say grammar, we need to generate code like this. This code finally will go back to the object program what we have in nature. Let us take one more example, which is we have been using for several classes, or variance type of expression. This is what we have been working all these days as a parse tree. Now if somebody asks to generate a code, not from exam point of view, but in general how it looks like. So for the given Pascal language what we have, so this is the code what we have. So it involves so many procedures. You can see there is assign, there is exp, there is exp with various what you call internal definitions, because you know one assign statement is defined into 4 more other statements. So for every statement we need to provide an unambiguous control like this. So similarly we have further factor is defined, and factor has so many. If you remember yesterday we were talking about this parenthesis, and also you can look at factor integer, factor ID, factor parenthesis, everything need to be given properly. So from that we can have a procedure like this, which will be a simplified, what by adding all those we are getting this. Finally from this we can visualize for the given statement. Given statement is a one such area, but these are all the procedures which are general in nature. So for that we can imagine a program of SICXC might be like this. So like that, depending upon the what actual input that is being supplied, your compiler need to generate the code. Okay, so this is what the process involved in this. So what we have to understand at this point of time is code generation requires lot of what you call design involvement from a designer, wherein the designer has to consider whatever is written from the lexical analysis or syntax analysis need to be further used in the code generation stage, where each non-terminal symbol or each construct in the programming language is associated with a separate, a unique and independent module or a subroutine or a code generation routine, which is general in nature. And for every input parameter that we are providing as a part of our programming or programs rather, they need to be converted or fit into these particular procedures, and these procedures should finally give without any errors a program like this. And this program is finally converted into our object code. Actually this is what we are talking about as object code, since we are not visualizing which programming. We are not taken compiler for a C, we are not taken compiler for Pascal, we are not taken compiler for Java. That is the reason why we are stopping at this SICXC. But practically speaking, whatever we are seeing on the right side, that is LDA, DTV, that is not SIC or SICXE, that will be actually your object code. This is only we are informing us to just understand, okay, this is how it is going to be. Once we know this object program, sorry, once you know the assembly program, we know how to convert this into object program. That is the reason why we are stopping it here. But what is actual outcome of a compiler? Not the SIC program or any assembly program. It is actually your zeros and ones. That is the object program. So don't get confused. Oh, code generation means it is assembly language program that is being generated. No, we are stopping at this point because we know how to convert this further. Otherwise, the actual outcome of a compiler is zeros and ones, which is actually your mission language. So this is the process behind the code generation. So from the exam point of view, what we need here, hope you understood the concept. So coming to the exam perspective, you should understand for every given language construct, we have an associated procedure internally by the compiler. The compiler designer will have this in place, and they will be making sure that without any ambiguity, these particular procedures are generated, and these procedures, when actual program is submitted, will convert the given program into actual object code. That process is probably one of the examples we can take, maybe as simple as this. We can explain. So this is very simple, only 3 lines. So we can write like this. You can write this diagram, that is a parse tree, and convert, say, like suddenly like this. You can say. So this is how we can. You need not write all this because it's not required. We can only say that there are procedures available, and we can directly jump to this and show finally this is the code that is being generated. So that is how we need to expect from the exam perspective. But understanding is important from the concept of a code generation point of view. So hope you can assimilate, understand what the code generation here. If that is done, probably we'll move to the next topic. So let me know if you have any doubts here so that we can get into the next topic. Any doubts at this stage? Okay, fine. So with this, we conclude the 3 stages of compilation, namely lexical analysis, syntax analysis, and code generation. So that is actual crux behind the compiler. But we know that time and again, people talk about efficiency. Have you generated efficient code? Have you got your CPU more efficient? So all this efficiency will boil down to, again, this program, which is not in our control. So object program is not generated by us, it is generated by a compiler. When a compiler is generating a program, which is an object program in our case here, for the further execution, we always expect a compiler to be more wiser in generating the efficient code. The question here is, can we make compiler not only simply generating the code, but also to generate efficient code or optimized code? Then probably we look at 2 concepts. One is the dependent features that enable the code efficiency, or mission independent cases that enable the code efficiency. So both the concepts are very important from the understanding perspective as well as exam perspective. So first, let us get into the concept of a mission dependent compiler features. So under mission dependent compiler features, we talk about 2 broader aspects. One, intermediate form of the program. Just now we talked about while discussing on the code generation. Current day compilers, which are more complex in nature, may not be possible to translate the given high-level language program directly into object program. Probably they require some intermediate form. And we also know that intermediate form is not an object program, but is just an internal representation to just inform the compiler what next to be done. At the same time, we also discussed that intermediate form is going to enable the compiler to have a more efficient and optimized code. So from that perspective, intermediate form of the program definitely is a part of the mission dependent feature rather than mission independent, because it is coming in between the code generation stage, and we know code generation is a part of the mission dependency as well. And hence we have a intermediate form definitely coming as a mission dependent compiler feature. And second part, since we are talking about optimization, that is a code efficient here, since compiler is expected to provide an efficient code, obviously compiler code optimization concept activity is there both in the mission dependency mode as well as mission independency, but more so in the mission dependency. So we'll touch upon and we'll go in detail rather how mission dependent code optimization can bring in some good support in making the object code more efficient or more optimized. These are the two things what we'll be touching under the mission dependent compiler features. First one is the intermediate form of the program. Second one is the mission dependent code optimization. So let us look at the first concept. What is the intermediate form of the program? Why it is required and how this is going to be beneficial from the code generation perspective. Just we know that, and how it is going to help in the optimization as well. So first let us see how intermediate form can be generated. As we know, intermediate form is mainly required to make sure that the complex compilers, when they translate given program into its equivalent object code, might require some internal representation only to make sure that they end up generating the more optimized or more efficient code. So intermediate form will simply help the compiler to facilitate that we know very well. And let us see how the form looks like. Take an example. The intermediate form is going to be a representation such that the compiler can take a call wisely at the same time of code generation, whether this particular code is going to make any sense or this particular code can be optimized there and there itself, such that the code generated can be in one step or one go without redoing anything and everything again and again. If that is the case, our intermediate form is coming handy. We'll see that how it is going to be. Before that, let us see what is this intermediate form, how this can be represented. There are scientists who have developed various methods for this intermediate form, but one by name Aho Ullman is actually, you might have seen as a author of your automata theory or author of your algorithms, because he is the author of both these concepts, algorithm as well as automation. He has given a concept called as an intermediate form, which are mainly for the instructions that are executable. So obviously our programming languages, we have everything as executable instructions, and thereby his method is more suited for our languages. And he has formulated a quadruple type of method which can be used as an intermediate form for a mathematical expressions especially, or any executable instruction in general in a programming language. So as per his method, or as per the advice what we have from Aho, we can represent the quadruple in 4 terms. The first term is a operation, what type of operation we are performing. Second term is operand, that is operand 1 and operand 2, then followed by result. So any instruction we have, any programming construct we have, need to be further separated or bifurcated or distributed such that each instruction can be represented as a quadruple. Quadruple here, first containing the type of operation what we are doing, what are the operands that involve in this operation, and as a result, what is outcome we are getting. These 4 points are there as part of the intermediate representation. If you take, for example, sum is equal to, yesterday we have taken sum is equal to a plus b into 20, let us say. This is the expression, but this expression has more values. This is more complicated, let us say, or we can have more complicated expressions as well. But let it be any level of complication, we need to bring it down to 2-level type of expression. That means involving only 2 operands. Right now it has a sum equal a plus parenthesis b into 20. There is equal operator, there is a plus operator, there is a multiplication operator. That means 3 operators are there. So if you go more than 2, probably it will get complicated. So better to distribute any big expression, however complicated it is, into various sub-components involving only two operands. That's the reason why he brought the concept of a quadruple involving only two operations. So that will give a more practical approach of looking at a problem, and more sequential manner we can get the solution for this instead of combining everything and confusing at the later stage. That is the idea behind this, and it is really suitable and more valuable from the compilation code generation perspective. So let us see this, how this can be used now. So the concept here is represent every executable instruction as a quadruple. If the instruction is more complex, that is involving more than two operands, try to distribute or try to break it into sub expressions such that no expression will have more than two operations or operands in general. If that is the case, so probably we can have this quadruple being used as a intermediate form for every instruction that we have in the programming. That is an idea behind this. So operation, operand 1, operand 2, then finally the result. Let us take some example. So take sum is equal to sum plus value. To take this as example, so sum, probably this you can take it as equal if you have confusion. So sum is equal to sum plus value. So here we have an assignment on the left hand side, we have an expression on the right hand side. Whatever the result we have, finally it has to be given to this. So ultimately, as a compiler, it has to send the result of sum plus value to be stored into sum. So like this, we keep using plenty of instructions in our day-to-day programming. If that is the case, each of them will be identified as intermediate form, as we have seen just now of AHO concept. As a quadruple, and internally it is easy to represent. If you look at this, this is the quadruple what we have for the given instruction. How is this written? Let us see. So we know that before this entire expression is executed, the first right hand side data is computed. After that, whatever the result will get will be assigned that to the left hand side symbol. Like that, we have a two-stage process here. So first compute the right hand side and assign that right hand side value to the left hand side. If that is the case, first let us take sum plus value. That is how the process goes internally. Same thing is going to be used in the intermediate form. Sum plus value. So if you want to distribute this for a intermediate form, it has an operation, operand 1, operand 2, and result will be there. So plus is the operation, sum and value are the operands, and the result is generated as a I1. I1 stands for a intermediate because it is not a final. This result will be used for some other purpose. Thereby, we call it as a I1, that is intermediate form. So now what we have? We have a sum equal I1. So what is intermediate form for this? So this is equal, let us say, if not dots, equal, that is operation. What is the operand now? This is operand I1. We don't have another operand, it is empty because there may be instructions which involve only one operand. So our quadruple is possible to involve up to two operands. If any operand is not there, you can avoid this, but you have to specify a space because it is a quadruple. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't write just because there is no operand, you can't write equal to comma I1 comma sum. No, then it is not a quadruple. It becomes a triple. But AHO says it should be quadruple. So in any case, if you do not have a value, leave this as empty, but with a comma separated to mention that it is involving only unary value, not the multiple values. Then followed by what is the left hand side? Sum. So the result is sum, which is stored with the value I1 with a assign operator. So this is how the intermediate form exists for these two, when this given instruction called as a sum is equal to sum plus value. Similarly, if you take A is equal to B plus C, so first we need to compute B plus C, then assign that to A, similar fashion. So same thing, plus B, C, I1, intermediate form. Later we have a colon or equal, whatever it is, I1. Here also there is no second value, leave it blank. And third one is the where the result is being stored, that is the A. In the previous case, it is intermediate one because there is no destination, because still we are computing. Once that is done, since it is end of the entire expression, we know the destination is A and we write that. So that is how we will be using this. This is the way we can represent the given any expression for that matter, any executable instruction for that matter in terms of a quadruple. If it is involving more than 2, we'll bring it down or break down to multiple intermediate forms like this. So probably you can try on this, how to represent the given expression into quadruples. So take this expression and try to develop quadruples. Meanwhile, let me take Asta,
Yes, sir.
Abhinav,
Present, sir.
Aishwarya,
Present, sir.
Ambarish,
Yes, sir.
Anu,
Present, sir.
Arbaz, Arjun,
Present, sir.
Ashok,
Present, sir.
Vinita,
Present, sir.
Bhavisha,
Present, sir.
Chaitra,
Present, sir.
Chatterjee,
Present, sir.
Manjunath, Diksha Manjunath,
Present, sir.
Deepika LG,
Present, sir.
Deepika MB,
Present, sir.
Murli Krishna,
Present, sir.
Gangubai,
Present, sir.
Guriya Kumari,
Present, sir.
Harshit,
Present, sir.
Junjar Singh.
Present, sir.
ಯಾಕೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಜುಂಜಾರ್? ಕಾವ್ಯ,
Native ಹೊಡಿದೀನಿ sir.
Present,
ಕಾವ್ಯ,
sir.
ಕಿಶೋರ್,
Present, sir.
ಕಿಶೋರ್, ಲತಾ,
Present, sir.
Yes, sir.
Present, sir.
ಮನೀಷಾ,
Present, sir.
ಮಂಜುನಾಥ್,
Yes, sir.
ನಯನ,
Present, sir.
ನೀಲಾಂಜನ್,
Yes, sir.
ನಿಶಾಂತ್,
Present, sir.
ಪವಿತ್ರ, ಮೈಥಿಲಿ,
Present, sir. Present, sir. Pavitra.
ಓಕೆ, ಮೈಥಿಲಿ, ಪ್ರಿಯಾಂಕಾ,
Present, sir.
ಪವನ್,
Present, sir.
ಆಕಾಶ್,
Present, sir.
ರಾಜೇಶ್ವರಿ, ರಾಕೇಶ್,
Present, sir.
ರಮ್ಯಾ,
Present, sir.
ರಶ್ಮಿ,
Present, sir.
ರವಿಶಂಕರ್, ರಿಜ್ವಾನ್,
Present, sir.
ವಿಶಾಲ್,
Present, sir.
ಸವಿತಾ, ಶ್ರುತಿ,
Present, sir.
ಸ್ನೇಹ,
Yes, sir.
ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿ,
Present, sir.
ಶ್ರೀನಿಧಿ,
Present, sir.
ಶ್ರೀನಿವಾಸ್,
Present, sir.
ಸುನೀಲ್,
Present, sir.
ವೈಷ್ಣವಿ,
Present, sir.
ವಿನಿ.
Present, sir.
So you can show me the intermediate form. So whoever does, let me know. Generate the quadruples one by one as you visualize, as you expect the program to be executed. Whoever does, show. Intermediate form is being asked in the examination. We can't neglect. They'll give an expression like this. We'll ask how intermediate form can be generated. Anybody trying? Is anybody willing to show? We have some inputs. It will not take so much time. If you're not interested, it's a different story. I will move forward because I can't see what is happening background. Unless you are communicative, I'm sorry. I can't guide you further. And definitely will not take more than 2 minutes. You want to waste time? I don't know. I have no solution for that. But you should be vocal enough.